I'm sure everybody has a moment in their life where they feel like they're just going down in a spiral. A kind of feeling where nothing can really adjust it or stop you falling. You have these moments, and then we don't know where to go. I don't want to sound inconsiderate or like I'm downplaying other people's feelings, but I seem to have more of these moments than anyone else I know. Fortunately, my friends all knew that I'd misused some blades at my lowest points, and I hadn't really found a way to get out of the situation I was in. I don't want to get into the fine details, because I'm not comfortable with it all yet. But essentially, one by one, things in my life started to fade away, or get worse. My health, physical and mental, started to slowly decline, and that weighed on me harder than I could ever have imagined. Being so stressed after working long hours, I developed severe pains in my back, and I was constantly encouraged to get them seen to, so I could give myself a sliver of hope for my future. Eventually, the pain got so bad that I developed insomnia. I wanted to sleep so much, but I just couldn't. All the physical and mental pain that was inflicted on me just counterweighed any amount of exhaustion I had. I also became schizophrenic, started hearing things in my mind. One day, I decided to do something about it. With the help of a few friends, I decided to see a healthcare professional. They tested a few different senses and movements to see what really needed to be done. I was put on a few sets of meds. One for sleeping, one for my back, and one was just serotonin. I gave up a week of work, purely by the doctor's orders. Frankly, I wanted more time off. A year or two would have been good, but it wasn't meant to be, however. Upon exiting my appointment with the doctor, I was warned that there might be a few side effects of the medication, due to the clash of chemicals I was swallowing to try and help myself recover. I expected this. However, I could never have imagined the real consequences that would come out of it. It was my first night trying out these substances. I was lying in bed just before this, thinking about the mess in my brain, trying to make any sort of sense out of it. I reluctantly leaned over, grabbed the small capsules of meds, and closed my eyes. I hesitated before taking them, started to panic. For some reason, I couldn't get what the doctor said out of my head. However, I stuck with the guidelines, and thought any side effects would be minimal, and gone once I got used to it. After a few minutes had passed, I started to drift off, and eventually fell asleep. Well, at least I thought I did. I started to dream. I dreamt that I began falling, no reason, or any surroundings which I could have fallen off. Just falling. I eventually landed on the ground, right on my back. I stood up and tried to get my bearings. However, all I could see was a plain white room, like a room in a mental institution. The only thing that was around me was a glass case with a tape in it. Using my fist, I smashed it and retrieved the tape. I played it, just thinking it would help me get out of this place. Maybe find a way out of this dream completely. It said, "Hello. Welcome to your life. You spent your entire life being consumed by your illnesses, and now is your time to show that you can overcome them. In this life, you have no illnesses or problems. Every test you fail will give you one of them back. If you manage to get past everything, even if you fail some tests, I will allow you to see me, the person behind this. Good luck. And just one more thing. If at any point you don't want to continue, just push the button on your chest. I'll let you guess what happens next." Just stood there, mouth gaping open, in complete shock. My initial thought was wondering who the person behind this was. That made me more determined than ever to try and discover this. I felt around all of the walls, trying to find any sort of clues. The only thing I found was another tape. It said, "This is your first test. Many times you've seen so many poor others who spend their days in a padded room. I know how guilty you felt about this, so I'll put this to the test. If you can find an opening within 10 minutes, you may proceed. If you don't, I'll keep to my side of the deal and be forced to give you back one of your problems. But I don't think that will happen. It will only happen if you let it. Good luck. Pressing against all the walls, I realized some were made out of different materials. One out of concrete, one out of plaster, and the two on either side of me made out of padding, which felt soft and comfortable to touch. However, all this made me think of was the tape. I pressed my hands as hard as I could up against it, trying to make any kind of force, and thus move it out of the way. Nothing. I checked the timer. 5 minutes left. Slightly more panicked and nervous, I moved away from the first wall and towards the next. Even after my first push, it felt more loose. So I knew that if I had any chance of survival, it would be to fill this wall. I kept pushing and persevering until I noticed a small gap in the side. That wall didn't fit in correctly, so I squeezed my fingers into the gap, trying instead of pushing to pull it towards me. The wall jerked forward and wobbled slightly. I knew that this was my key to freedom. I put every single ounce of strength I had into this task, till finally, it crashed down and shattered into a million pieces. I proceeded through the exit that had been created and made my way into a new room. I didn't know where I'd walked into. Everything was pitch black. I stumbled around aimlessly, trying to get my bearings and be somewhat more comfortable. However, I couldn't fathom anything out. There was no textures anywhere, and I started to panic again. Eventually, after ages of me trying to find something, I found a switch. I flicked it, and all the lights in the building turned on. The room was decorated like a construction site. Something about it made me feel uneasy. It looked exactly the same as the site of my first job, the one I had to leave due to my health issues. I looked all around, and the paints on the walls started to move, as if they were telling a story, or acting as a slideshow. It showed the date, which was the day after I left. My replacement was new to the job. I could already see so many mistakes in what he was doing, so I knew that he would get hurt imminently. But I didn't know to what extent. He was crawling along a narrow beam, trying to reach the other side to nail, but due to his naivety, he crawled too fast, lost his balance, and fell 30 feet to his death. I heard about this news, and felt partially guilty. That incident was out of my control. I always tried to tell myself it wasn't all my fault, but I never really got over it. This new room brought back all the memories of that day. It was all just another trick to try and make me seem like the enemy. I examined my surroundings briefly, pressed on the walls, the floor, and made a few mental notes of places where I could escape, as I always knew that some gimmick would be in place. I just finished my observation of the room when the screen flickered and I heard that same person speak to me. This is the second part to your test of guilt. However, it's much more specific. I'm sure you've watched the footage that was recorded on the site, and I imagine it was hard for you to watch. However, this is the reality. That man shouldn't have died, no matter the circumstances. But this is your chance to get rid of the plague of guilt you've made yourself have, and this is the medication for that. The only way out of the room is this lever, he said, as the walls opened, and a long plank of wood with a lever at the end stuck out, with a staircase neatly presented next to it. Your task is to climb up on this plank and pull the lever. Do it quickly though. That plank will be removed in 60 seconds, and you will meet the same fate as that poor, innocent trainee. But that won't happen, right? Will only happen if you let it. Choice is yours. The tape stopped abruptly, and I had to react. The only thing I could hear was a ticking sound, coming from a clock which had just been revealed on the wall. I slowly climbed up towards the plank, making sure not to fall or be disrupted, as I knew the consequences all too well. It wobbled frequently. Every time it did, I reassured myself that I wouldn't die. I'd just get back one of my illnesses. I crawled along the plank, maybe making it halfway before I looked down, only to realize how high up I actually was. It sounds stupid, but that height was another thing I took for granted when I was standing below it. Unfortunately, my focus remained on the height, and I wasn't paying attention, leading me to wobble too far to the left and fall 30 feet downwards, landing directly on my back. I felt an immense pain, way more than I ever would have imagined, which is when I pieced together the illness they gave me back as my chronic back pain. The most common, but therefore the most easy to deal with. A key dropped down beside me, as well as a small pot of meds, one which I recognised, as they were exactly the same as what I take in real life. I got to my feet, but after I did, I instantly wish I just stayed lying down. I took for granted how life was without my pain, but I wished I could turn back the clocks and try again. The only thing available for me to relieve it was this pot of meds, ones which were barely sufficient for a day. I took the key, dusted myself off, and found the keyhole, which was placed out of sight in the walls around the decorations. I put the key in and entered, leaving the building site behind. The door creaked open, and I found myself outside. There was nothing abnormal or strange about this area. Everything seemed to be like real life. The trees swayed gently in the wind, and a calm atmosphere filled the air. I had no idea what my test could possibly be, because nothing seemed like it was designed to kill me. Sure, maybe something could, but I wasn't sure what. The flowers sprouted up from their roots, and the sun shone down on, coating the field in front of me in a golden light. One which I'd never really seen for a while, due to being bedridden most days. My back was still giving me a copious amount of pain, but I found a shady spot under a tree, got myself comfortable, and tried to rest. I say tried, partly due to my pain, but also because as soon as I sat down and closed my eyes, I fell through the ground into a small cage where the lid closed above me, leaving me back to being completely unable to cherish the beauty of the outside world. I looked around, my only light source being a candle, and found another tape. I pressed play. Enjoying the view? Anybody could have, but for you it's a treat, as you never experience this as much anymore. And I wonder why. You feel so useless and pointless, to the point where you don't want to do anything. Now, this in itself is not something which pleases me, or anybody. However, you never made an effort to try, at least once. Was it due to your lack of motivation? If it was, I'll give you the perfect motivation. This box represents the cage you put around yourself, letting your illnesses and brain get in the way of doing anything. You would have noticed it's fairly small, and I can assure you, it's not getting any bigger. It will only get smaller. The first thing I want you to do is check your back pocket. Pause the tape, as this confused me at first, because I didn't think I had anything in there, except my meds they gave me just before. But then I realised they weren't there. I played the tape again. Isn't it weird how things just come and go? You use so many of those pills, you wouldn't miss one small tub, would you? Some might say you're doing this intentionally, But that's just an assumption. You must play 3 smaller games, and if you get through them, you may have your medication back, as much of it as you would like. This is your first. The aforementioned box will get smaller, as you mentally give yourself less of a chance to succeed. Your task is simple. Find a way out. I'll give you 2 options as to what you can do to escape. Firstly, here is a bottle of acid. It will melt the stone that has made the box, but is dangerous to use. Secondly, here is a hammer and chisel. It will destroy everything at a slower rate and maybe block your path, but it is safer. Both have consequences. These aren't guaranteed to occur. The tape ended, and the box started to shrink. It wasn't in large increments like I thought it was, but instead, being pushed from the left, right, and top towards me. I started to panic and quickly considered my options. The podiums which housed the items were designed to retract once I had made my decision, to allow only the use of one article. I thought I could beat it though, and I put both of my hands onto the items and lifted them off at the same time. Sure enough, both platforms moved back swiftly, but I was able to grab both tools. I debated which to start off with, but thought back to my latest job which I got laid off of, a chemist. I'll admit, I wasn't the best, and maybe I guessed a lot, but I knew a little bit about acid, and recognised that this acid had a low pH. Therefore, I used the acid to partially melt the rock, and used the chisel to break through it. The plan worked better than I expected, and I was able to break through the first layer below me. I repeated this process, and everything was great, until I realised the walls were being pushed more quickly, which made me panic even more. I kept trying to break through the limestone, fighting through my back pain and all the stress I was tolerating. Eventually though, I felt the bottom, and it felt weaker and more hollow. I gave one last enormous hit on the ground, and luckily it broke. I fell down some sort of chute, and into a room which had a large glass wall, where I could slightly make out a few random shapes in the back, behind the wall, even though everything was pitch black. The shapes looked like they were struggling, and they kept moving, as if to suggest they were about to die, and they wanted to escape. The only thing that was even somewhat lit in the room was another tape, but this one was different. It was attached to a mechanism, but the end of it was in the dark, not allowing me to see what I had to do. All I could see was a note, which read, "Remember your past, and embrace your future." I didn't pay too much attention to this note, because I assumed it was another one of his tricks, or something to make me think unnecessarily. Using this logic, I pulled on the tape, due to it only being held up by a string, and heard a few gears turn, and the lights in the room turned on. I looked all around me, to get my bearings, and saw what was really behind the glass wall. 2 people. I froze, upon seeing who they were, and played the tape, longing for an explanation as to why they were in front of me. Welcome to your second test. This one will test how keen you are to let go, and if you are brave enough to play God, considering you've let yourself fall down this rabbit hole for far too long. I'm sure you recognise the 2 people standing before you. One, your ex-girlfriend, you still have feelings for, and you cared so well for, until you became ill and started showing her neglect and less care. The other, your best friend, person who has stood by you all your life, and you've trusted them so dearly. But it's the same story. You started to care more for yourself. Maybe you think that I'm being unreasonable, but you pushed them completely out of your life, never even picked up the phone to message or speak to them. Did you even know that your best friend has had a child? Or your ex-girlfriend needed as much support as she has ever needed, having struggled with depression? If you still think I'm being too extreme, I'll make this easier for you. As soon as this tape finishes, their fate is in your hands. However, you can only save one of them. You will have 1 minute to make your decision, and to decide, you must push the saw in front of you all the way into their body, ending their life, and representing how you've pushed the people closest to you so far away. Oh, and one last thing. You don't have to push the saws if you don't want to. Although, this will result in both of them dying, and blood staining both of your hands, rather than one. But, this will only happen if you fail to decide. It will only happen if you let it. The choice is yours. The saws in front of them, my left and my right, started up. My two friends started screaming, and pleading with me to let them go free. I knew I had to kill one of them, but I wasn't entirely sure who. I was happiest when I was with my ex. I started to believe that nothing could ever go wrong again. Sure, we broke up, but I knew this was my fault. It could never be hers. I remember that day so vividly. I was lying in bed, as usual, trying not to move too quickly to hurt myself. She finally announced she was finishing with me. And I remember my response. I didn't even acknowledge her. I just focused on trying not to get hurt. Sure, maybe I didn't hurt myself physically, but I didn't realize how much I just hurt myself and her mentally. But on the other side was my best friend, the one person who stuck with me throughout my entire life. I couldn't possibly think of one time we were angry with each other, apart from the final time I spoke to him. He cared for me a lot throughout my most painful times, before my medication. I took his help for granted and pushed him away, stating that I didn't need any help. I didn't realize how wrong I was at the time, but I couldn't think about that right now. The time was ticking, and I only had a few seconds left. I quickly moved to my right side, pushed the saw as hard as I could, and killed my ex. After all the memories I'd had with my best friend, I couldn't possibly kill him. Not after everything we've done together. Not with this new sense of morality and aliveness I felt. The blood splattered the glass, leaving me unable to see my friend anymore. But at least I knew he was alive. The lights in the room all turned on, and I found an exit door. I'll admit, I was skeptical. I couldn't see any other way out. After having gone through several of these traps, I was getting quite accustomed to trying to find the unobvious method of escaping. But thankfully, the door opened with no consequences, and I was greeted with every wall now being made of glass. But in a circular fashion. I saw a monitor in the top left of the room, and a tape was waiting for me, stuck in the bottom of the enclosure. I played it, after having repositioned my back, trying to alleviate as much pain as possible. Hello, and welcome to your first. The last 2 games have tested your decision making, and how well you handle being under pressure. This third test will push this to the extreme. Take a look around. Look up at the monitor. Get your bearings. I looked up, only to find I was trapped in what looked to be a conical flask. I'm sure you remember your short time as a chemist, or should I say, a fraud. You faked your qualifications, but only took the job, as the hours were short and the pay was good. But now, I'll make you pay. I'll make you reevaluate your choices, so next time, you won't make the same mistake. Above you, in the clear glass containers, are 2 substances. One is merely water, pure as anything, substance which gives life to millions. The other, sodium hydroxide. You should know about this. Just in case you don't, let me fill you in. This acid is highly corrosive and irritant, and will cause severe burns. But it won't kill you. It will just bring back the pain you felt, but in a different way. You must decide which is which, pulling one of the 2 levers in front of you, which will pour one of the liquids into the small, cramped flask, filling it to your head height. On doing this, the other liquid will pour into the jar behind you, which contains the medication you so desperately rely on day after day. Will you choose the option which results in some pain, but the mental aspect is so much heavier, as you deal with this pain every day and carry so much resentment towards it? Or will you choose the option which results in more pain, but is arguably easier for you, so the main pain you feel will be kept at bay, and this pain will heal over time? Or will you take the third option and merely guess, leave it to luck? I wouldn't recommend it, however. If you don't make the decision in 60 seconds, I will remove the medication and pour the acid into the flask, leaving you in 2 sets of pain. But that won't happen, will it? It will only happen if you let it. I knew I had to pour the acid into the container with my medication, because I'd seen the damage misusing acid had caused. That was my fault again, but I couldn't dwell on it. I had to make a decision. The container above me to my left looked exactly the same as the one on my right. There was no difference in coloration, and both were liquids. I knew that sodium hydroxide was as solid as standard, but I tried to look for any sort of particles or anything. It was like finding a needle in a haystack. I looked up at the right container and saw my own pathetic reflection looking back at me, and then up at the right, and the same lowlife looked back. I'd given up at this point and just wanted this test to be over. Hastily, I pulled the left lever and filled my flask with a soothing, cold, refreshing liquid, which I knew as clear as day was water. In a way, I was so relieved. But looking back at my medication being dissolved quickly reminded me of how much real pain I'm in, no matter the circumstances. I punched a large hole in the flask, and all the water drained out. And once I made a hole that was big enough for me to fit through, I left that room, with no intention of returning. A small shard of glass pricked my back as I learned of pain I endured all the time. I didn't care. I stumbled. I opened the final door and found the exact replica of my bedroom at home. I should have guessed something like this would have happened, but in my haste, I didn't piece it together. There was only one thing different about it. A large safe was placed on top of my bed, with a 4-digit padlock on it. There was also a tape on top of that, which I played. Hello, and welcome to the final game. I was going to give you these games in chronological order with your life, but as your life is so fucked up, I couldn't find a way to logically place it. All you need to know is that this is your final game. The safe before you has everything you need to figure out where I am, and finally, you can meet me. However, the combination to the safe is needed. There are 3 ways to find it. 1. Look around the room and find the numbers you need. They are hidden and out of the way, but they are here. 2. Every game before had a hidden number in the corner. If you were paying attention, instead of scouring the rooms for a way to escape, you may have actually found something different. Maybe these numbers would have stuck in your mind. After all, your eyes work perfectly fine. Maybe you could have used one of the last completely healthy parts of your body to find me. 3. Will require some thinking. I know that you've self-harmed before, and I know where. Think back to those times, and think deeper into yourself. You will find the combination there. In 5 minutes, this room will be blown to smithereens, and you'll... In 5 minutes, the room will be blown to smithereens, and the only way to prevent this is by opening the safe. But that won't happen. It will only happen if you let it. Make your choice. This tape left me speechless, but there was no time to lose. I looked down at both of my arms, towards my wrists, and started to cry. I could deal with the pain, but always in the wrong way, leaving me in more pain than I started with. I thought about what the tape said, and looked around the room, finding a scalpel and knife on my desk. My only assumption was that the combination was written on the inside of my skin. The only way to prove this, however, was to reenact it. I grabbed the scalpel and cut a small incision around my scars, enough for the skin to flap over itself. And sure enough, I found 2 numbers. I moved to my other arm and repeated the process to find the other 2 numbers. I had inserted them into the safe, blood dripping down my entire arm onto the safe. But I opened it, with a minute to spare. Inside, I found a tape and something wrapped in a black bag. I played the tape for the very final time. Congratulations, you've played the game. You haven't passed, nor have you failed, but you endured it. Now, if you really want to find out who has done this to you, open the bag. I opened the bag, being shocked, as to the only thing being in there was a mirror. No directions or anything. I thought one intrusive thought to myself, but I decided to let the tape explain. Maybe now you'll finally understand that I am you. I'm among you every day. I'm in the thought at the back of your mind, which helps you stop being in pain and self-harming. That thought always gets pushed to the back, and you let all your issues and troubles overwhelm you. Why is this, I wonder? During our games, you've experienced life with and without the physical pain you rely so heavily on meds to overcome. Surely, life with the pain wasn't as hard as you make it seem. You might be wondering about the mental pain. That's already among you. Every game made you think and relive some of the worst and best moments of your life. However, this is only a dream. Whether you will continue in your old ways, your restrictive way of life is out of my control. Everything is in your hands now, and I'm sure you won't go back and regress, right? It will only happen if you let it. I stood there, shocked. I dropped the tape onto the ground as blood dripped onto it. And then, I woke up. I woke up in my room, in the psychiatric ward, my meds to one side, and feeling oddly refreshed, despite the immense amount of anxiety felt. I wasn't sure what happened, but I was now determined to escape from my hellish life. But, in the middle of my small speech, I noticed some writing on every wall around me, scribbled insanely. It read, "It will only happen if you let it."